Exam protocol is a very important process, and the importance of following that is key to the success of you as an individual. What I intend to do over the next few minutes is talk to you through who are the key personnel, people that you will be directly involved with during the exams process. What do you do before the exam? How do you prepare to make sure in terms of your preparation that everything is correct? And I'm not talking about revision, I'm talking about other elements. What to do on the day of the exam, what to do during the exam, and your general behaviour. Now, what you must remember is that these exams are public examinations, they're set externally, and there are certain protocols that have to be adhered to. If you don't, there can be very serious consequences, and I'll refer to those as we go through this morning. I am sure by now, in terms of the key personnel, you're aware of the school exams officer, Mrs. Bellamy, who is assisted by Mrs. Skellum. They are based in the exams office directly next to the chapel. Any queries or concerns that you have in relation to your exams need to be directed towards those two people. And you'll get used to that environment. You've already come across it to a certain degree with your exams in Year 10, but it becomes far more formal as we go into the mock process next week. There are also some very, very important people known as the exam invigilators. They are employed by the school during the exam period to manage the exams. There will be a chief invigilator and a number of other invigilators in your exam venue. Essentially, they will issue you with instructions. It's vitally important that you follow what they say. Okay, planning before. As I said a little bit earlier, it is not about revision. This is about what's making the exam as easy for you as possible in terms of your overall organisation. Mrs. Bellamy sends out to you an exam timetable. That exam timetable is sent out well before the exam period. The whole idea is that you can check that exam timetable to see whether you have been entered for all of the exams that you think you should be. If there are any omissions, it's vitally important that you let her know immediately. She will be aware of any potential clashes and any potential issues, but if there are things on there that you think relate to you individually, please tell her. So that is your responsibility to find that out. It's also vital that you know, and it may well sound very obvious, when your exams are. What date does a certain exam take place on? Does it take place in the morning or does it take place in the afternoon? You would be amazed at how many students every year from Year 11 and Year 13 who we have to call to say that they're not in for an exam. And of course that puts extra stress on the individual. You don't want that to be the case. So making sure you know morning, afternoon and the day of the exam is so important. As is arriving on time. Morning exams at Bishop Stopford currently start at 9 o'clock. Afternoon exams at 1:30. There may well be exceptions. If there are exceptions, you will be told well beforehand. We ask you to arrive at the venue 15 minutes before, i.e. 8:45 and 1:15. You can imagine the stress it puts on you if you arrive at that exam venue 2 or 3 minutes beforehand. So the importance of getting to school early in the morning is paramount. Okay? So if your buses are often late, it may well be you have to speak to parents or guardians about getting you in that little bit earlier. It is far better to be there earlier than to be late and put undue stress on yourself. Find out where your exams take place. During the mock period, we do not use the main sports hall over there, but we will use that as our main exam venue during the summer. Other venues in here, the gym, in the main hall, and if you are an access student, your arrangements will allow you to take your exams in possibly smaller rooms. But again, that will be on your individualised timetable, and the responsibility is on you to ultimately find that. You will also be issued with a seat. It's not a case of going into the exam venue and sitting where you want. There is a seat allocation. The allocation is based alphabetically from the front of the exam room across the front, A, B, C, and so on, with A1 being at the front and A20, for example, being at the back. So the numbers go backwards. It will help you if you know and remember what your seat number is before you arrive at the venue. In other words, this is all things you can do beforehand, as is having a pencil case with the correct equipment. It may sound obvious, but you must be aware that you can only take into the exam venue a clear pencil case, a plastic pencil case, clear, see-through, and make sure for each exam you have got the right equipment, whether it's maths and that you've got a protractor, calculator, and so on. We are not in a position to lend equipment to people. Plastic bottles. Obviously, hydration is important. You are allowed to take water into the exam venue, but the exam board stipulate that labels have to be torn off. It saves us time that if outside the exam venue, before you arrive, that you've actually taken off all of any labels that exist on the bottles. Okay, so there have to be clear plastic bottles that go in. This is obvious, and I'm sure by now you know the importance of not taking any mobile device of any form into the exam venue. Essentially, your mobile phones will be taken off you, more of that in a moment, but it would help if, for example, you didn't bring your mobile phone on the day of an exam, or alternatively, any other form of equipment you leave at home. So whether it happens to be an iPod, a mobile phone, any form of electronic data storage, on a watch, for example, all right, are not allowed in the exam venue. And I think it's vitally important, possession of unauthorised items, such as a mobile phone, is a serious offence and could result in disqualification. That is not a myth. I'll give you an example a little bit later of what happened to a Bishop Stopford student several years ago. So we now come to the day of the exam. Before you leave home, recheck your timetable. Okay, make sure you know what the venue is, what is the start time, what's your seat allocation. It will take the pressure off you. All right, you need to be concentrating on the exam itself. Crucially, enter the room in silence. As you walk through the doors of the exam venue, you are under exam conditions. Okay, it's vital that you are totally silent as you go in. As you go in, you will have the opportunity to hand in your mobile phone or device, and you will be given a ticket which will have a number on for you to collect from the exams office afterwards. But it helps us if you don't bring winning at all on that day. Find and sit at your allocated desk. Obviously, if you know that you're A7, you can go directly towards that. You know where it will be. And this is new this year. Not listen carefully to what the invigilators say, but do not write on your exam paper before instructed. In the past, subject staff may have encouraged you to write a mathematical formula, to write a chemical equation as soon as you get in the exam, in case you forget it. You're now not allowed to do that, okay? And you would be penalised as a result of doing it. So it's vitally important that you are aware of that new regulation. You can't do anything until the invigilator says you can write. Place your wristwatch on the desk. That's obvious, so the exam invigilator knows they're not using it for any use. But crucially, any worries or concerns, you raise your hand and you ask for support from the invigilator. That's what they're there for, to answer any queries and make you feel at ease during the exam period. Right, okay, during the exam, I would hope by now you're all aware the importance of using a black biro. The exam board stipulate the use of a black biro or a black pen, and the main reason for that is that nearly all exam papers are now marked online, scripts are copied, and then the examiners mark them on their computers. Anything that is not in dark ink, it is difficult to read. And what you must remember is that an examiner marking your paper does not know you as Joe Bloggs, they know you as £4.50. In other words, they're marking the paper. It's not like your teachers at school who will know you as an individual and perhaps will give you that extra bit of time. So don't give the examiner the opportunity not to give you the credit that you are due. Don't start the exam paper until you're told to do so. All right? Vitally important that you follow those instructions. It goes without saying there is no form of communication. So you enter the exam room, you find your desk, you sit down, you are in silence, and you face the front continually. You do not turn around and communicate. There is very limited opportunity to borrow equipment. As we said a little bit earlier, it is vitally important you plan appropriately, and therefore you come with a calculator, a protractor, and so on. What if you finish early? If you finish early, you are not allowed, through exam regulations, to leave. You are not allowed to leave early. So even if you finished, you can't leave till the end of the exam. So that means you have to sit in silence until the exam finishes. My advice to you would be, check it over again and again. Because obviously the exam time is there for a reason, and that it's set that the exam should take you that amount of time to complete. At the end of the exam, you do not just walk out. The invigilators will collect your papers, normally row by row, and you will then be dismissed. Obviously, the dismissing will not take place until every paper has been collected. Again, it's a security issue. And again, if you're aware of that, it makes the job for everybody a lot easier. Behaviour. It goes hand in hand with everything else. The school has a license for external exams. If one student breaches that, they put in jeopardy every other student. So we expect impeccable behaviour during the exam period. There will be zero tolerance. As a school, we have to report any incidents that take place that we feel are a breach of security, if we think there's been any form of cheating, if we think a student has misbehaved, and it's then left to the exam board to how they deal with that. So everything has to be reported. We are not prepared to jeopardise the results and the exams of every student for the actual misdemeanour of just one or two. And there are very serious consequences. And very often people stand up and so make these sort of threats that things will happen. Well, I will tell you a true story of a student in year 11 about 5 years ago who had a new mobile phone. His new mobile phone he didn't want to hand in. He didn't know how to turn it off. In the middle of his GCSE English exam, his mobile phone went off. We had to report that incident. That student was voided for his complete English GCSE exam. So it came back as an X. The exam board could have done it for every exam that he sat, but they did it for the English. Think of the consequences of that. That student wasn't automatically into the sixth form because they hadn't got English. Due to the exceptional circumstances, we allowed him and he had to retake it in the November and obviously then passed. But I think it's vitally important you're aware that those sort of consequences are followed through very seriously by the exam board. Now, I've gone through their exam protocol. Exam protocol is vitally important. I am aware that a lot of those things are very obvious and straightforward, but I think it's vitally important that you know how to prepare, how to behave during the exams. If that is the case, your chances of success are enhanced because you're taking the pressure off yourselves and just focusing on the exam itself, not where the exam is, what time it is, and how to behave. Thank you very much.